Starting. Welcome to the City of Milpitas Planning Commission meeting, November 9th, 2022. Anyone wishing to make any public comments via Zoom can look at the agenda. I don't see anyone here in the chambers. All right, next, Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Albana. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Albana. Roll call, Ms. Medina.
Good evening, everyone. I will now take attendance, starting with Commissioner Albana.
Present.
Commissioner Wasti,
Present.
Chair Chuan,
Present.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
Present.
Commissioner Galang,
Present.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Present.
and Commissioner Mosen.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Next item, conflict of interest declaration, City Attorney.
Thank you, Chair. I ask each of the commissioners whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, City Attorney. Ms. Medina, can you go down the roll, please?
Commissioner Albana,
None.
Commissioner Wasti,
None.
Chair Chuan,
None.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
None.
Commissioner Galang,
None.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
None.
and Commissioner Mosen. None.
And Chair, tonight on the agenda, there are no development projects or contracts, so I don't believe we need the extra question.
Great, thank you, City Attorney. Next item, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes for November 9th, 2022?
Move. Approve.
Got a motion from Commissioner Glong.
I
Got a second. And I got a second from Commissioner Albana. Okay, go down the roll. Commissioner Mosen,
Aye.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Commissioner Awasti,
Aye.
Commissioner Galong,
Aye.
Commissioner Albana,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
Aye.
Chair Chuan is aye. Motion passes. Agenda is approved. Next item, approval of the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October 26th?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October 26th.
Okay, got a motion from Commissioner Medina Ashby. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, second from Commissioner Awasti. Roll call vote. Commissioner Mosen.
Aye.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay, were you at the last meeting, the 26th?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I wasn't. Sorry,
Okay,
I wasn't.
okay,
Abstain.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Commissioner Awasti,
Aye.
Commissioner Galong,
Aye.
Commissioner Albana,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella.
Aye.
Chair Chuan is abstained. I was not at the meeting. So you have 5 ayes and 2 abstentions. Okay, next item, announcements. Any announcements from any of the planning commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Wasi, do you have an announcement? You guys, your lights are on. Commissioner Albana, do you have an announcement? Okay, all right, no announcements from any of the planning commissioners. Okay, planning director.
No announcements tonight, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, planning director. Next item, public forum. Those interested are invited to address planning commission on any subject not on tonight's agenda orally via Zoom webinar. Instructions are in the agenda. Speakers may provide their name and city of residence for the recording secretary's record, and comments may be limited to 3 minutes or less. As an item not listed on the agenda, no responses required from city staff or the planning commission, and no action can be taken. Planning commission may instruct the staff to place the item on a future meeting agenda. Ms. Medina, do we have anyone in the on Zoom that wishes to make a public comment?
No, Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, next items, public hearing. First item, 9.1, draft Milpitas Metro specific plan. Planning Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, we're very pleased to present for your discussion the Metro specific plan. As you know, we've had a couple of meetings in the past with the staff and the consultants to discuss different parts of the plan, and we're now ready to present it to the council probably in the new year for adoption. But prior to that, we wanted to have a couple of conversations with the Planning Commission so that you're comfortable with the material. So tonight, staff and the consultants will present an overview of the plan. We'll talk about the scope of work and give you a kind of a reminder of the work that's been done to date. The contents of the plan will also cover the supplemental environmental impact report, the EIR, and then if you're be welcome to answer or to ask any questions that you might have about the materials. Because it's a very large document between the draft plan itself and the EIR, we wanted to give the Planning Commission members a little extra time to review the plan. So we'll take the next few weeks until we won't have a second meeting in November because of Thanksgiving. So we'll go into December, but at your next regular meeting, then we would bring it back to you for the formal public hearing and a vote on the recommendation to the council. So tonight will be a presentation and questions that I mentioned. We have our consultants. We'll introduce those in just a minute. I'd like to turn the time over to our project manager, Kevin Riley, who has been working with city staff and the consultants over the past 3 years on the preparation of this plan. And he can introduce the team and then we'll start the presentation. Kevin, if you're there, I'll turn the time over to you for a few brief comments.
Thank you, Ned. Chair Schwan, Vice Chair, Commission, it's great to be here. And I've been very happy and proud to be a part of this plan for several years now. Glad to see it coming together. We knew when we started this that it certainly was time to update the plan. And so we're happy to bring to you the draft that we hope will go to the City Council for entitlement in February, I think. And we've been very fortunate to have a great team with us. Jane Lynn from Urban Field, Christina Paul from M Group, and then other members of our team that have all worked on this. And of course, many members of your city staff that have been involved in this. And, it's nice to finally get to this point. We hope that you get some time to really look through this plan, look at the environmental impact report to the extent that you feel that's necessary. And so ultimately, when this comes back to you in December, you'll feel comfortable with what we have brought forward. I will say that it's very nice to have this kind of an opportunity. Very many communities don't quite have the opportunity that we have with the metro area that we have. It's pretty well separated from most of the single family neighborhoods in the city. So we get a real advantage for the economic development that comes out of it, the ability to really bring some housing in to meet our RENA requirements. This at least helps meet the RENA requirements. And so bring some real pluses without really any of the negatives that you get with intensifying a part of your city. So, it's a great plan. We hope that you're all comfortable with it, but please feel free to ask questions or dig into it as much as you can. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Jane Lynn, Urban Field Studio, to kick us off here. Thanks, Jane. Go for it.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, Planning Commission. It is our pleasure to present the Milpitas Metro specific plan. I also want to say that we have Christina Paul with M Group and Christy Black with ICF, who has done the draft subsequent EIR. So that's also being presented tonight. So let's get started. When we began on the next slide, we were really doing a update for the task, the Milpitas Transit Area Specific Plan. We then renamed it to the Milpitas Metro Specific Plan, and that will replace that plan upon adoption. So what we'll go over today is some of our process and a summary of the project and some updates, and then we'll talk about the SEIR and public review and we'll turn it over to you for questions and comments. So onward, we just wanted to share a little bit about the planning process that we went through. It's been quite a few years now that we've been working on this. Started in March 2020, right before the pandemic, and have worked steadily to build the framework for the plan and draft it, and also do the supplemental EIR, the SEIR. We're at a really exciting stage now where we have finalized after receiving comments on the draft plan, and we're very excited that we are here. This has been a culmination of a lot of work. So on the next slide, we have just a quick overview of some of the outreach that we did over time. There was quite a lot. Of course, a lot of it had to be done online, but we were able to do quite a lot of stakeholder interviews, and we used online surveys, which were pretty well attended. And also we did some online workshops as well. And what we found was that there were a lot of the things that we found really went into shaping our draft and our final draft here. And they really have to do with a lot of the different aspects of connections, places to meet and gather, and open space and connectivity and all of that. So you'll start to see that as we lay out what we have put in the plan. Anyway, the community engagement was really great. It was great to hear from everyone, and we did our best to incorporate as many comments as possible. On the next slide, we have this is what it looks like if you want to encourage anyone else. We know that it's in your packet, but if anyone is interested, the milpitasmetro.org website has the specific plan and the SEIR are there for you to download. And so actually there's even a way to view it quite easily on the website, so you can just read it. And it is quite a meaty document, but well illustrated, I have to say. Next slide. So here's a little bit of a project summary. I will just want to remind you, when we first started, we looked at when the task was planned, that in 2006, we looked at an aerial then, and then we looked at an aerial as we were just beginning our project in 2019. And comparing 2006 to 2019, a lot of great change had been part of the task. And so you can see quite a lot of new development because of that. And actually, it continues today. The project status in this area in 2021 really shows quite a lot of activity, a lot of projects under construction or entitled. And in fact, the task was a very successful plan in bringing a transformation of the area from something that was more light industrial and office to a neighborhood. And that is something we want to continue. On the next slide, we have some shots of what it's like now. And I know that you're all quite familiar with it, but it is really fun to see what kind of place Milpitas Metro has become. And so, of course, at its heart is the transit center with BART and the bus and the VTA connections to light rail. And it's really great to see the pedestrian bridge. That's one example of what there could be more to come and in the plan. So then there's on this next slide, a bit of the character of the new housing that's gone in, and we're so excited. There's a Trader Joe's now, and there's a lot more neighborhood amenities that are on their way in terms of new development. Also, we see that there's a lot of investment in the infrastructure that has to do with, well, there was the overcrossing, but what I love is there's a little bit of art being added now. There's some really nice rooftop gardens The creek has this opportunity to be an amenity as well and be a place where we can cross over and connect to more of the neighborhoods that surround the Milpitas Transit Center. And of course, the pedestrian environment with each project is really improving. So these are all things that we think we can build upon from the task with the Metro Plan. And of course, I wanted to include this because very special to me is that my mom actually just moved into the plan area, and she is now part of the senior housing in that area, and her view out the window is really quite amazing. It's really just coincidence that she has become a resident as part of the plan and that I'm working on. So this has been a very fun thing for me. So with that, what we see is that there is quite a lot that has transformed, but there's still more that the metro area needs to make it complete. That is more access, more amenities, more services, more parks, and there's just needs to be more places to go and things to do. And so that's what the plan really addresses. And so the plan is also considering how to make Milpitas more resilient for the future. We are really thinking about a 20-year time frame, and we know that traffic will only get worse, or we will really increasingly rely on our alternative transportation options. And this is one of the best areas for that. There's so many transit options with the light rail, BART, and bus that it really is. These are just wonderful resources that not all neighborhoods have, and it's just very special for the Milpitas Metro. And we'll all need places to go. Now, the Great Mall is a really big part of our plan, and the way it evolves over time will be what attracts people still as a destination to this place. And this transformation into a more walkable mixed-use place will be a desirable thing to have. And as part of all of this, we will really be providing a lot of housing because there is a shortage and we need more options for this kind of housing. So really making this more complete neighborhood. So with all of these kinds of great things, on the next slide, we have put together a vision. It includes quite a few different aspects, but really the main idea is to create a complete and unique urban neighborhood. It's already getting started, and so the plan really helps bring that home. And really it's to foster neighborhood services and a variety of retail, to create and expand space for jobs near transit. There's an innovation center to provide both affordable and market rate housing, to provide safer and more attractive multimodal connections for walking and biking, and to provide a variety of shared public spaces that enhance the sense of place in the metro area with visually memorable structures and buildings. Here's just a cascade of some of the chapter spreads. So we really go through quite a lot, but as you're looking through it, the introduction really is something we're kind of covering today in the presentation, but we really get into it with the land use and public space in chapter 2, and chapter 3 addresses the site and building design guidelines and standards, and then chapter 4, mobility and circulation, and 5, infrastructure, and 6, implementation. So that's all of the different chapters. Next. Oh, I'm going to turn this over now to Christina to talk about some of the plan updates.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It's very nice to be here with you this evening. Liz, I was under the impression that we would be sharing the presentation, and so I was fussing with it. There's a little bit of content that I'd love to be able to share. So is it possible for me to share my screen? I'm sorry for the change. Sorry, Liz, Ned. Is that possible?
We're working on it to see if that can be done. I'm not sure
Sorry
whether.
about that.
Yeah. Give Liz a second.
we have to work with the IT department. So just a moment, please.
While we're waiting, let me also say, Jane brought up some of the alternative transit that comes up. And don't forget, we have Milpitas Smart now, which will allow people to get not only to the transit center from almost anywhere in the city, but also to the center area and be able to get to jobs once those jobs are on the ground. So that is another opportunity that we have with the Milpitas Smart app and service that's there. Hopefully, some of you have been able to use it so far.
All right. I'm seeing something a little bit funny. Are you able to see my screen? Is it paused? Can you see a slide about the general plan?
It's loading.
Okay, let me try one more time. I'm sorry for the technical changes. How's
There
that?
we go. You got it.
Great. Okay.
Now we can see it.
Thank you so much. And I apologize for the late change. I wanted to, because it's been some time before we have come to the commission, and I know that some folks are getting acquainted with this plan, I wanted to go back in time a little bit and talk about how this plan relates to other plans and the foundational document, which is really the general plan. So the general plan actually carves out the specific plan area and identifies the Milpitas Metro Plan specific area and says that this will be a walkable, transit-oriented area with a mix of land uses, which encourages walking, biking, and transit trips, minimizes vehicle trips, reduces vehicle miles traveled, accommodates substantial growth, minimizes impact on local roadways, and thereby reduces urban sprawl throughout the region. So this is really an encapsulation, a summary of our charge. This is where we're coming from with this plan. The general plan really establishes something that's fairly different from much of the rest of Milpitas. We also, as we were working on the plan, we're working with the departments in the city and other consultants who were developing plans at the same time that this plan was under development, and made sure that we were coordinating really closely with them. So the plans and the folks who were developing the plans that we spoke to were not only the team developing the general plan, but also the recently adopted objective design standards and economic development strategy and implementation actions, the climate action plan, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and the Trail, Pedestrian, and Bike Master Plan. I also want to highlight the fact that we were looking forward as we were developing this plan towards the housing element. The housing element, as I'm sure you're all well versed in, was presented to HCD in October, just this last month, and planned for a total capacity of more than 9,000 units. And as we were drafting the Metro plan, we were thinking about not only this housing element, but also the housing element that will follow in 8 years, and thinking about where the city could accommodate that RHNA. And this is really one of the significant options that the city will have. It didn't really need to be significantly tapped into in this element, but in future elements, this will be a spot where the city can say, these are the key spots, or in future drafts of this housing element to lean on this more directly. So here is our plan area. One of the changes from the task plan area was that we expanded ever so slightly. We took a little bit of the Main Street plan area along South Main Street, as well as the innovation district that was identified in the general plan, and wrapped that into this plan because they really function as parts of this neighborhood. And we wanted to take this plan as an opportunity to support the work in particular that is proposed to make the innovation district a hub of employment and activity and economic development in Milpitas. On the right-hand side, you see the updated land use map. This has gone through several iterations. You can see that most of the darker colors are clustered around that transit station, and we get a little bit less dense as we go out. The blues of the innovation district are where our employment lands are, and then other purpley bits are mixed use, and then the browns are residential of varying densities. The plan dedicates a variety of different number of units and office space capacity, industrial capacity, retail capacity, and hotel room capacity. Much of the developable area is clustered in that Great Mall area, which is not part of the TASP area that was really dedicated for change in the last plan. And that's really a significant change between the TASP plan and this plan. And I should note that we've been working closely with Simon Group that owns the Great Mall to ensure that they feel comfortable with the direction that this plan is going in, to check in with them about their potential plans for the future. And we worked to present the city's vision or draft vision for this site, so that when Simon is interested in coming forward with some potential plans for redevelopment, that could be some residential on a side of the property, or mixed use, or more intensive use along Great Mall Parkway. City has that basic establishment, but we've also worked to set enough of a framework that the Simon folks can come to the city and say, we appreciate your vision. This is what's feasible for us. This is what we'd like to do, and then work on developing a development agreement with the city. You can see all of the different capacities that we have outlined in the plan here. We also want to note that with this increased development, we anticipate some increased investment or needs for infrastructure. Much of this is dedicated to increased pedestrian and bike facilities, and that the funds for that work would come from the TADF, which is a fee specifically on development within the TASP area. That has been functioning since the TASP was established and has funded many of the improvements in the area since then. And this would be updated. This fee structure is anticipated to be updated once this plan is finalized. Looking at the Great Mall District, we have, as I mentioned, increased density on the Great Mall site. And some of these pieces are changes from the TASP, and then also changes from previous drafts of the plan. So we have significantly increased the development capacity of the Great Mall site and changed that from only commercial or retail to an allowance of more of a mixed use, vibrant, community core or neighborhood core sort of spot. And then also ensuring that the retails that is there will continue to be viable, because that's not only a significant source of income from the city, but also a significant asset for the community. And so we wanted to ensure that there was opportunity for both larger retail plates as well as more neighborhood serving, local serving retail opportunities. We also want to note that we do anticipate that there would be significant park space in the Great Mall. Many communities now are being anchored by their parks. These are key parts of the community, and we wanted to ensure that these would really be constructed as development went on, rather than potentially being left to the end of a development and maybe not funded. So park development would be triggered after 1,000 units were developed at the Great Mall, and then no more would be permissible. And there would be infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure updates throughout the plan area. Looking at the innovation district, there's a geographic innovation district that we've identified in the plan, but the programming for the innovation district is a little bit more flexible. So we do imagine that the piece of the plan between BART and 680 is the core for commercial, but we're recognizing that more commercial capacity is possible and even desirable towards the Great Mall on that piece of property adjacent to the transit center. So there's some flexibility in where the program for the innovation district can go, but we needed to draw a line for for planning purposes. We also have some park space and a potential police substation space identified near the transit station and then under a PG&E easement, as well as a ped bike crossing into the innovation district and some proposed new roadways. Then we would need to make sure that there was high-speed internet and everything else that R&D and industrial firms would need and office users. I talked a little bit about this around the geography and then also the fact that there can be innovation-related uses outside of this particular geographic area. In the Tango district, which is a reflection of the fact that we have Sango and Tarab Court, so that made Tango for us. In the Tango district, we had a little bit in earlier drafts, we had a little bit higher density near trade zone, and after some review and work with staff and preliminary conversations with council, we reduced that a little bit and then expanded the park and ensured that there were connections throughout the district, but not connections that would create a lot of cut-through traffic or inhibit pedestrian connections to that important transit center. You can see some visualizations of these different neighborhoods. In the McCandless district, which is across from the Great Mall, that location is significantly constructed or has been significantly redeveloped since the TASP area, but the Main Street area still has some parcels that have not been redeveloped. And after, again, some conversations with staff and preliminary conversations with council, we reduced the potential densities there and have kept them largely the same as what is in the TASP. And we changed the park location along Main Street to be a proposed park location. All right. Please let us know after this presentation if you have any questions. And for now, I will turn it over to Jane.
Yeah, I just wanted to also just speak to some of the imagery that we started off with, and we want to continue, seeding in our ideas what the future may hold. So we really see this as a important opportunity. This is the Metro District is now connected via BART to the rest of the region, so it makes it a very important place in the region. We think that there is the opportunity for very livable neighborhoods with just more vibrancy and more activity that will build on what already makes Milpitas really attractive and will grow with future transit. And then this last slide before I turn it over to Christy, it's just that, the Metro Plan is really an important step for the prosperity of this neighborhood, and that we really started a good thing that needs to be completed. The task was excellent at doing a transformation for this area, and this Metro Plan will bring even more city amenities and services that will complete that vision. So with that, that's sort of the conclusion of the draft plan. And next, Christy will talk about the subsequent EIR.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Christy Black. I'm the Senior Planner with ICF and the Project Manager for the Subsequent Environmental Impact Report, or SEIR, and I'll present on that tonight. First, some background on the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, process. The CEQA guidelines provide that an EIR is really an informational document, and it's intended to let the agency decision makers and the general public know about the impacts of a proposed project or a plan, identify ways to avoid or reduce these significant impacts of a project, and also take a look at reasonable alternatives to a project. And in terms of evaluating impacts, the focus under CEQA is really on physical impacts on the environment rather than, say, economic or community impacts. And ultimately, the SEIR is just one input you can consider in ultimately making a recommendation about the plan. And the City Council will consider the SEIR as well. And environmental impacts, as a result, are just one of the factors considered by decision makers in project review and approval. And it's important to note that an SEIR doesn't advocate or promote the project or any particular alternative. But certification of the SEIR does not determine either whether the project will be approved or not. And I'll get a little bit more into those decisions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the environmental review process so far, and it goes all the way back to scoping in the fall of 2021. And between then and now, the city's released the draft SEIR for public review, and that happened in September and October of last year. The city also held a public hearing on the draft SEIR, and now the city has prepared and released the final SEIR for the Metro Plan. And the final SEIR responds to comments that the city received from the public on the draft SEIR. And tonight we are presenting to you so that in the future you can make recommendations on both whether to certify the SEIR and whether to approve the project. And that's shown in the box on the right here. And tentatively, as Kevin mentioned, the City Council will then decide in February whether to certify the SEIR and whether to approve the Metro Plan. Next slide. So I've referred a few times to the subsequent EIR, which is a little bit different than an EIR if you've dealt with one of those before. And in this case, the subsequent EIR actually relies on the EIR that was prepared for the task. And so this subsequent EIR focuses instead on what's changed since preparation of the task EIR. And that includes a geographic expansion of the plan area that's shown in the map on the slide, changes to land use classifications and policies, additional population and employment growth that's projected, and also updating the planning horizon year to 2040 from 2030. On the next slide, this shows the task plan development, the amount of that's been entitled as of 2019, as well as additional projected development under the proposed Metro Plan. So as an example, 6,955 units out of 7,577 task units were entitled by 2019, shown on this top row here. The Metro Plan, if it's approved, would allow for additional 7,000 units for a total of 14,577 units in the planning area. And so with that incremental change, the subsequent EIR, instead of evaluating the total of 14,577, just looks at that incremental change of 7,000 units for residential. Likewise, it evaluates the incremental change in the other land uses shown here. So the next slide shows the resource areas that were evaluated under CEQA. And there was also an initial study prepared under CEQA for this project, and that concluded that there are numerous resource areas under CEQA where there would be no change in the impact from the original task EIR. And so the function of that is the subsequent EIR didn't need to look at those resource areas. And those, just as some examples, are aesthetics, biological resources, energy, hazards, and hazardous materials. Instead, the SEIR only looked at the areas listed on this slide: air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, land use and planning, noise, population and housing, public services, recreation, transportation, and utilities and service systems. So this slide, I've decided to focus on just the resource areas and impacts that were found to have significant impacts. And for those where they're available, the SEIR also identifies feasible mitigation measures to reduce those impacts. And these impacts that are listed on the slide are pretty typical of larger development projects and specific plans, where construction impacts occur due to use of heavy machinery and noise occurs due to loud equipment. So these are all pretty typical impacts. And just as some sampling for some mitigation measures, for air quality impacts, there are requirements to use equipment that reduces construction emissions, use of renewable diesel, and also purchasing mitigation credits when air quality significant thresholds are exceeded. For operations, natural gas use would be restricted, and there would also be a requirement to purchase mitigation credits, again, for any exceedance of significant thresholds. As another example, for greenhouse gases, mitigation requires that project proponents would implement construction best management practices and also purchase greenhouse gas mitigation credits to reduce emissions. For noise, there would be a mechanical equipment noise reduction plan to address operational noise. And for vibration during construction, mitigation requires protecting structures that are susceptible to damage and also implementing a nighttime construction vibration control plan to reduce disturbances to people nearby. And so the challenge with specific plans like this one and CEQA is we often don't know precisely what individual projects will look like when they're developed or what kinds of measures are feasible at the time a project's developed. For example, air quality credits might not be available in a great enough quantity once a project is proposed to fully mitigate air quality impacts in the future. And so a lot of the impacts listed here remain significant even after there is mitigation, just to be conservative in the CEQA documentation. But all of the mitigation is drafted to be flexible at this sort of programmatic level evaluation, while also being as protective of the environment as we can be under CEQA with the information that's in front of us now. So the next slide explains the three alternatives that the SEIR evaluated, and one of those is the no project alternative. The other two alternatives are one that caps the maximum height of the development and therefore reduces the number of residential units that could be constructed. And the other is the removal of the western expansion area, which also reduces the number of residential units, but not as much as the reduced height alternative. And while the no project alternative is meant to disclose what would happen if a proposed project is not approved, the other two alternatives must avoid or substantially reduce a significant impact of the proposed project, meet most of the basic project objectives, and also be potentially feasible. And so these two alternatives that reduce the residential units meet all of those CEQA requirements. And the subsequent EIR compares the impacts of these alternatives, and CEQA requires that we identify an environmentally superior alternative among them. For that, this subsequent EIR concluded the reduced height alternative is environmentally superior. And it's important to note that even though both of these two alternatives would reduce a number of construction and operation related impacts, because that's what CEQA requires for alternatives, this is also at the expense of providing more housing. The proposed project provides 500 and 1,000 more units of housing than these two alternatives. So that would be the trade-off. And relatedly, this would mean that there would be a reduced number of units set aside to meet the city's RHNA obligations. Next slide, please. So this explains what is in the final SEIR, and the draft SEIR contained the information I just reviewed on the last few slides. After public review of the draft EIR, the city prepared the final SEIR, and it was released earlier this month and contains responses to the 5 comments that the city received on the draft SEIR, as well as some minor revisions to the draft. Just a quick overview of some of the comments. They included a suggestion to include a project called the Milpitas Personal Rapid Transit System in the plan area, some concerns about land use designations on very specific parcels, comments about transportation, and also a comment in support of the project. The response to comments document contains responses to each of these comments. And so some revisions were also made just to correct some minor errors in the draft EIR, which is very typical, and also to reflect some more recent changes to the draft plan. But the revisions don't change the conclusions that were released in the draft EIR in terms of impacts and mitigation measures. Next slide, please. So now the final SEIR has been prepared. What are the next steps for both the SEIR and the plan? So today, the Planning Commission is hearing a presentation about the plan and the final SEIR. In December, I believe it will make a recommendation on both. These are the two decisions that are eventually going to be made. First, should the City Council certify the SEIR? And certification of the EIR, again, is not an opinion or recommendation about the project, but instead is a certification that the EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA and the state CEQA guidelines, and that it also reflects the independent judgment of the city. The other separate decision on which the Planning Commission will make a recommendation is whether to adopt the plan itself. And once that recommendation is made by the Planning Commission, the City Council will tentatively take up the same two decisions, I believe, in February. So whether to certify the EIR and whether to approve the plan. And that concludes my presentation tonight. Thank you.
Christy, thank you so much. It will, Christy, I'm just wondering, and I know this is a little bit improvisational.
Mhm.
Can you comment on the number of comments that we got on this EIR relative to a comparable EIR?
Sure. Yeah, so we received 5 comments, and within those, there's maybe one letter that had a handful, and most of them had 1 or 2 individual comments, and that is a pretty light stack of comments. So nothing in opposition of the project. We did have some in support, but this was a pretty minimal group of comments for an EIR for a specific plan of this size.
And so I just wanted to note that we found that really encouraging, because that evidenced for us that there was pretty significant community support for the plan. In cases when there's a lot of community resistance, we get a lot more comments on the CEQA documentation. So I want to summarize quickly what the next steps are for Milpitas if this document is finalized and adopted. And those steps would be to revise the zoning code, to adopt the zones that are specific to the metro plan, to update the general plan. We just, because of those expansion areas, we would need to update those boundaries in the general plan, to update the fee structure that we discussed a little bit earlier. The citywide objective standards have largely been complete, but we just need to do a final cross-check to make sure that we are all matched up there. We would be thinking about whether or not this would be a helpful plan to support the housing element or any housing opportunity zones that the city might be interested in establishing. And then the city is working on the Gateway Main Street specific plan. And then the plan would be fully integrated into the city's documentation, and future projects could be relying on it for their design. That concludes our presentation. I will stop sharing and return the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Paul. At this time, does any of the commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, Commissioner Galong.
Yeah, Chair. I want to clarify this. It says staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct public hearing. Remember that, conduct public hearing. Are we going to conduct a public hearing?
What's your question?
Yeah, it says in the recommendation, it says staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is actually just getting the presentation today. So on December 14th is when we're gonna, do a vote. And so what you see on there for the recommendation, there's actually no vote today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is not final.
So it's just any questions you have for them based upon the presentation they gave us, or any of the material that we had that maybe you want clarification on or anything like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you didn't have any. Okay. Anyone have any comments? Okay, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I've got a comment here, or maybe it's a little bit of a question too. Since we're kind of keying on BART and light rail and all that other stuff. We've got a railroad track that goes right behind the Great Mall, and I'm wondering if anybody knows whether it would hook up to, I believe, the Emory station, that from then it'll go all the way back east, the train will. And thought that might be a good spot right there next to the Great Mall to have a little train station. So anybody got any ideas there?
Well, I will just offer that we did look at that Union Pacific track, and right now it's mainly freight. I believe there is some limited service, but that would definitely be for the transportation planners to consider how to connect regionally. But there is quite a bit of setback behind the Home Depot, where that could possibly be a place, but we have not considered that in this time frame. Maybe in the future.
Okay. Should we be, considering it since the future is right around the corner?
If I may, Vice Chair, yes, it's a very interesting idea. It was not part of the scope of this particular project, but it actually noted. And so for a future project that would be related to this, that could be a possibility. But as noted, the tracks are primarily used for freight at this time, and the BART tracks actually go along that same right of way. So that's our we are planning, or we're updating the transit area plan that was put in place in order to have the BART station constructed and open. So we're primarily planning for passenger trains at that location, as well as the existing light rail stations.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Wasti.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the plan vision, item number 4 says to provide affordable and market rate housing. Are we going to see at least 25-30%, but it says affordable and market rate, it doesn't give a percentage? Are we going to see the low market, low income, very low income, and below market rate BMR housing in the affordable category? And what will be the percentage which we are going to tell the developer to develop those houses with the market rate housing? Thank you.
Yes, I can cover that, and maybe Ned, if you have anything to add, or anybody else, we can add. We are not requiring. We're requiring the same percentage of affordable housing that Milpitas requires elsewhere in the city, which is part of that 15% inclusionary requirement. It is very difficult for cities to require more than that because of state law. The city is looking for a lot of other ways to support the development of affordable housing, but this plan doesn't require a particular different percentage of affordable housing. We do work on setting the stage for that affordable housing and easing the development process. And then the city has a lot of policies in the housing element, for example, or is looking at city-owned parcels along Main Street or elsewhere in the plan area that could be used to support the development or be the site of the development of more of that affordable housing.
And I was just going to step back a little bit from that, a little bit of an overview. So for whenever we're considering housing or any other type of land use in the city, we first look at the general plan, as has been discussed tonight. And the housing element that we've looked at a few meetings ago is part of that general plan. And the housing element is updated every 8 years. We're currently in the process of updating that housing element. And the housing element of the general plan is actually the policy document that provides for and identifies all of the different sites throughout the city where housing, and particularly affordable housing, will be built. And so that's the general plan and the housing element. And then right under that, we'll say that provides the overall policy foundation, if you will. And then right under that is the specific plan that we're discussing tonight. And the specific plan is required to be consistent with the general plan. So as was discussed on one or more of the slides, the specific plan actually then picks up where the housing element leaves off, so to speak. And it identifies and provides appropriate zoning and development potential on the various sites that are identified in that housing element. So all of these various plans that the city's currently working on related to housing are all interrelated and work together. And then there's one other very important piece that Christina touched upon, and that is that a few years ago, the city council adopted the city's affordable housing ordinance. And in the same way that the zoning ordinance is the purpose of the zoning ordinance really is an implementation tool of the general plan, and those two items work together. In a similar way, the affordable housing ordinance works together with the housing element to ensure that new projects that are built, all of them are required under the city's ordinance to set aside at least 15% as affordable. And when we say as affordable or below market rate units, those units are all it's proposed by the developer, and there's a lot of negotiation and back and forth with city staff from the housing division on what the level of affordability is. So, and then all of that is rolled up and it again reflected in the housing element. So that's, as projects come forward, each of those will have affordable units set aside in conformance with the city's affordable housing ordinance. So these documents, and then I'll just close by saying these documents set the policy foundation for all of that to occur. And then we have these various ordinances that ensure that the policies that are adopted in the planning process are then implemented as projects come forward. If that helps.
Thank you, Planning Director. Any other questions from any of the commissioners' comments? No comments. Okay. Or questions. Planning Director, you have.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick general comment. I know that was a longer presentation than we usually get, and it was this has been a long, really a 3-year process in putting this plan and the environmental impact report. So I know that was a lot of information to throw at the Planning Commission all at one time. Hopefully, we along the way we've had a couple of different check-ins, so hopefully that not all of the information looked new, and I think we've all looked at it a couple of times. But I do think over the next couple of weeks, if you have a little bit of time to set aside, again, the staff report tonight provides a really good overview of everything that's in the plan. But the document itself actually turned out quite nice. It's very attractive, has some nice diagrams, nice photos. But take a look at that, and if questions come up, then yeah, we'd certainly send them my way, and we can discuss with the consultants if needed. I guess last thing I'll say on that is that the EIR, the environmental impact report, those documents tend to be very long, and there's really the CEQA process is more of a legal process, and there's a lot of legal boxes that we have to check, and certain information and certain types of analysis that have to be included in that type of document. We certainly don't expect the Planning Commission to read every page and understand every data point in that document. Some of it is very, very technical. But the main point on that is that we're very confident that we have very competent consultants that have put that together. So it's really more of a legal document, and we want to always make sure that the document itself it protects the city. But as was mentioned in the presentation too, that the purpose of that document is really to inform the public of any potential environmental impacts in certain categories, as you saw, and that's a very detailed and very comprehensive document. But the plan itself is actually quite nice, and I would encourage everyone to read that. If you don't want to read the whole thing, the introduction itself gives a very compact but broad overview of the document. And really the most important and the most used item in that entire plan will be the land use diagram. You saw the colored map that has all of the land use thing, and you saw that last slide. There's 5 or 6 next steps that over the next year we'll be updating the zoning ordinance, and we've adopted the objective design standards. At some point we'll be bringing the housing element back to you. So this plan really lines up a lot of subsequent work for the planning commission, the planning department, and the planning commission. So we look forward as this plan moves forward to the council and hopefully is adopted early next year, that it will line up the work for this body over the next year or two. Well, the plan is a 20-year plan, so it really directs the work of any new development that occurs in the metro plan area moving forward.
Thank you, Planning Director. And I see Commissioner Mosten, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Just have to take yourself off mute.
Yes, I just want to follow up with what Planning Director mentioned. It seems like a very comprehensive plan and very well done. And I was very interested. It was very captivating. However, I have a question. They said someone mentioned park location has been changed to proposed. What does that mean? Is the land use is still not firmed up, or what's going on with the park locations?
I can clarify that. Thank you very much for the question. In some areas like the Great Mall area, and then also along Main Street, we want to have space for a park, and in particular in the Great Mall, because the final design of that will be subject to a likely development agreement between Simon and the city. We didn't identify a very specific portion. We just identified the need for park sizes and that parks would have to be developed at a certain point in the process. And then similarly on the Main Street corridor, we want a park over there, but the city wasn't quite ready to say it's exactly going to be this parcel or another. So it's suggested that park could be across the creek from where the trail is on the other side.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Mosten. Any other questions? Okay, Commissioner Abana.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted also to, in line with what the commissioners had said, it's very interesting if maybe you will be making sure that there will be more open spaces. I think I'd like to see more open spaces as we increase, in the development. Would you have more open spaces to consider? Small area space.
I can answer that, and maybe Christina, if you wanted to add more, you can. So there are sort of two types of open spaces. There's the public open spaces that are larger parks, like the one that's on McCandless, and the one that's currently, there's a smaller portion of it that will be added to Rathbone Park in the Tango District. So, and then there's one in Piper as well. So these are, and then there will be a fourth one as well in the Innovation District. So these are bigger parks, but there's also private open spaces as well that are within the developments that are publicly accessible. So there are other ones that are not shown quite on the map, but they're part of the new development to come. In fact, there's some examples of that already in some of the new development. So there will be some more additional open space in that way. Do you want to add more at all, Christina?
Sure. So in addition to what Jane said, we also are requiring 2 parks in the Great Mall area, or at least a sufficient amount of open space. And because of the design, it's anticipated to be 2 parks, as well as a linear greenway along Great Mall Parkway. We suggested shrinking the island in Great Mall Parkway, which is quite wide. It's 40 feet, to allow for some more space on the edges of that roadway so that could be linear park. The plan also makes 2 general recommendations. The plan makes the recommendation of ensuring that parks have a high level of usefulness, a high level of service, you could say, so that each park is intentionally designed to accommodate a variety of uses and to ensure that folks throughout the plan area have walking access to a range of different recreational opportunities. That could be quiet recreation, sitting and reading a book, active recreation, kicking around the ball, or social events, dancing, being in a plaza, that kind of thing. And then those parks are part of a larger system throughout Milpitas. And we again worked with the folks doing the Parks Master Plan to ensure that there was a complete park service availability for the citizens of the city. So there are then the larger, more community-wide parks that have big soccer fields and that kind of thing. The city that the plan then also forwards the recommendation of the general plan of allowing 3 acres per 1,000 residents, or supporting that requirement. As that land gets more difficult to find within the city, it becomes more and more important to ensure that each park is well designed, well programmed, and significantly accessible and connected to other recreational opportunities to make sure that people do have those opportunities to be outside, and to have new experiences in adjacent to a shopping area or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's beautiful, and it's awesome to know, because this updating of the Milpitas metro specific plan is really awesome, because then it's really updating our 20 years transit area. And it's exciting to see how the city will grow. Originally, when I came and lived here, I'm almost the age that Milpitas was incorporated, but definitely this one gets to meet the developing demands of the city. And as it's growing, it's really exciting to see the new growth and how this plan has been put together. So I'm so excited, and I thank everyone and all of you who had really put so much work into it. It's exciting. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from any of the commissioners? Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, like to open the floor to, I guess, Ms. Medina. Is there anyone, any questions? I don't see anything, but.
Chair, there doesn't seem to be any community members for this item.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I don't need to open or close or anything there. So, okay. So given that this is not a item that's being voted on, so I think just want to thank the presenters, on this, and looking forward to December 14th when we do actually vote to make a recommendation to the city council.
And
So-
thank you, Mr. Chair.
so
Yeah,
thank you again.
we look forward to bringing that back to you on the 14th. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you. All right, having said that, so we'll move over to our next item. Just want to thank all the presenters for the first item there. So now we're going to move over to the second item, 9-2 zoning ordinance text amendment. Back over to you, planning director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so our second item tonight is a public hearing item, and our senior planner, Michael Fasati, is here to give the staff report, and he will cover some of these sites. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. This is a zoning ordinance amendment related to accessory dwelling units. I think the past 3 years, each year we come to you with an amendment to the accessory to the ADU city's ADU ordinance. The reason that keeps happening is that this state legislature keeps making changes to the state ADU law, and state law requires consistency between whatever is at the state level and whatever the city is doing. And if we don't comply with that, in this case, the legislature made changes back in September and October, and the governor signed those into law. So they're in force, and the new legislation will go into effect on January 1st. So our ADU ordinance, the local level, needs to be updated before January or by January 1st, because if it's not consistent, then our local ordinance becomes null and void. And then we would have to rely on state law, but we want to keep a little bit of local control over our regulations for ADUs. So in a nutshell, the purpose of tonight's ordinance amendment is to bring our local ordinance into consistency or conformance with recent changes to state law. And Mr. Fasati will go through those changes. They're relatively minor, and he'll talk through each one of those. But I did want to give you a little bit of background on that. We have just for context, the city's been, I don't have the actual number of how many ADUs that we have built, but Michael may know a little bit more about that. They now go through the building department. The planning department checks the plans as part of the building review process, but we don't have a separate ADU permit or a separate planning permit for ADUs. It's been very streamlined. And I just wanted to make the comment that the city of Milpitas has been very successful. We've developed a number of online tools to help property owners understand how to build ADUs in their backyards. And we have, online analysis tools that helps them. And the building department provides an ADU Monday program where if somebody wants to build an ADU, they can come in and they speak to various staff from different departments. And, all of these things are to make the construction or the development of creation of ADUs as simple as possible in the city of Milpitas. And I'm proud to say that, I feel like we've been fairly successful at that partnership between the planning department and the building department in moving these any ADU applications that come forward and providing resources to the community. It's been quite helpful. So with that as a little bit of background, I'll turn the time over to our senior planner, Michael Fasati, for the staff report, and he can give you a few more details about tonight's amendment.
Thank you, Planning Director. Welcome, Mr. Fasati.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Thomas. I did want to do a quick shout out and thank Kevin, Riley, Jane, Christina, and Chrissy on that presentation regarding the Metro. That was some cool stuff. And I also want to let you know that Holly Pearson, our planning consultant, a friend of mine, she is here also to help if you do have any questions. But I think I can kind of share with you what Director Thomas quickly summed up. We are here for a zoning text amendment for our accessory dwelling units. Next slide, please. Okay, let me see if I can get my computer here. In September of this year, the state legislature approved 2 bills that impacted ADU development. More specifically, it impacted local controls on ADU development. In an effort to remain compliant with these state laws, the city has drafted an ordinance incorporating the changes the bills created. The specific changes will be shared with the Planning Commission this evening. If the ordinance isn't approved by January 1st, 2023, the our ADU regulations would be deemed null and void, which means that an applicant would only be required to meet the state standards to develop an ADU. Therefore, the city is also preparing an urgency ordinance to allow city regulations on ADUs to remain intact until the new ordinance becomes effective, which the planning department is forecasting by January 6, 2023. Next slide, please. In summary, the new ordinance will amend the Milpitas Municipal subsection Roman numeral 11-10-13.8, also known as our accessory dwelling units section. This is a section of the zoning code that references the city requirements to develop an ADU. As the slide states, this section of code provides the standards an applicant must meet to have the ADU approved for development by our planning and building departments. Next slide, please. For example, our current ordinance states that if an applicant wants to develop a detached ADU that is 16 feet or less, 800 square feet or less, and at least 4 feet from the side and rear lot line, they qualify for what we refer to as a ministerial approval. And just to clarify for the audience, ministerial means an act performed in a prescribed manner for a legal authority without regards to one's own judgment or discretion. So if an applicant comes in and meets these requirements, these standards that I just stated below, it doesn't matter. I have no judgment or discretion. We have to approve them to obtain a building permit. The new ordinance will allow the applicant to develop that same ADU that is now 18 feet or less. And this picture is an example because it can even go up to 20 feet or less if the height of the new proposed ADU is needed to match the roof type of the main structure, just like the image below shows. Like these matching gables of the main residence and the accessory dwelling unit would allow a resident to build a 20-foot tall ADU without discretion from the planning department. It should be noted that this rule applies to properties located within a half mile of a major transit stop, which is a vast majority of the city of Milpitas. Furthermore, if an ADU is attached to a main residence, the height can go up to 25 feet, again, through ministerial approval. Next slide, please. This amendment is a bit more challenging to explain. The city will not allow an ADU to be built in the first 20 feet of a residence property, but the state is requiring the city to allow an ADU to be built in what we refer to as a front yard setback if the ADU is no greater than 800 square feet and 16 feet in height, and as long as the ADU is at least 4 feet from the side and rear lot line. Therefore, they'll have the right to build in that front setback. The term we use for this, the city must yield to the extent necessary to enable construction of an 800 square foot ADU that is no greater than 16 feet in height. The state is also continuing to work on allowing cities to require less parking standards for ADU development. For example, when a garage, carport, or covered parking structure is demolished in conjunction with the construction of an accessory dwelling unit or converted into an accessory dwelling unit, the local agency, local jurisdiction shall not require that the off-street parking spaces be replaced. This will be included in our new ordinance. Furthermore, in an effort to expedite building permit issuance, the city must review a demolition permit and ADU permit at the same time. This is something just for full disclosure that the city of Milpitas already does do. So we don't see this having much of an effect on our operations. Next slide, please. Cities cannot deny an unpermitted ADU constructed before January 1st, 2018, because the primary unit is in violation of a building standard or a zoning standard. This prohibition does not apply to structures deemed substandard under state law, like a lean-to. This wouldn't be applicable, but we cannot prohibit, we can deny an application based on to create a new ADU or JDU based on the need to correct a non-conforming zoning condition or building code violation or unpermitted structure on the same lot. If the ADU is completely separate to any violations associated to the main structure property. That's an additional amendment we will be incorporating in this ordinance. Next slide, please. Additional amendments include not allowing occupancy rating or fire sprinkler installation requirements for existing primary dwelling units that propose ADU development. And lastly, the city will have a right to deny an ADU permit, but the city must give a full set of comments on why the ADU permit is denied within 60 days of receiving the application. This is known as a 60-day rule and only applies to completed applications where there is an existing single family or multifamily dwelling on the lot. Next slide, please. As zoning amendments require findings to be made, which includes the amendment be consistent with the general plan and will not adversely affect public health, welfare, and safety. Both of those findings have been made and they are represented in the staff report. Next slide, please. So with all zoning amendments, the city notices the ADU ordinance in the paper, and we literally received a comment this morning. So thank you, Liz, for getting this on the board and giving this to the Planning Commission. I believe the commissioners received the email from that gentleman that expressed their concern. The comment was from a designer about the existing ADU laws, not even about the proposed ADU laws. And I'm going to try to paraphrase the email. I'm not sure if the designer is in the audience this evening, but I will do my best to see if I can kind of explain with what the designer had shared with me and the concerns they have. This is language that we have on the slide directly from Milpitas Municipal Code section 11-10-13.08 G Roman numeral 7. It states, evergreen landscape screening must be planted and maintained between the ADU and adjacent parcels as follows. Now, this objective standards required if someone wants to build an ADU that is taller than 16 feet of today's standards, or it's greater than 800 square feet. So if they want to do something larger than what the state allows, the city still probably will allow it, but they need to go through these objective standards. One of our standards is landscaping. So the sentence on the very top of this slide says, what we refer to as a design standard. And the following 3 sentences below this design standard are the regulations. So in order to meet this design standard of evergreen landscape screening must be planted to maintain between the ADU and adjacent parcels as follows, we expect the applicant to meet these 3 regulations we have below. The first action is that the applicant must plant one 15-gallon size plant at least 5 linear feet of the exterior wall of the ADU. You have the option of planting a 24-inch box size plant, which could go every 10 feet along the exterior wall. So if you're looking to the image on the right, I like pictures, so hopefully this helps you out. This ADU would not be in compliance because if you could see to the left and to the right of the ADU, they do not have landscaping. So this image is just used for informational purposes only. The second action to meet in compliance is a plant specimen must be at least 6 feet tall when installed. As an alternative, a solid fence of at least 6 feet in height may be installed. Again, looking at the image on the right, the applicant is in partial compliance. They have a solid wood fence installed, so they do not have to plant a plant that is 6 feet in height. But they are required to still plant that plant every 5 feet if this is a 15-gallon size, or every 10 feet if it's a 24-inch box. The third action is the landscaping must be drought tolerant. Staff would need to confirm the plant species to confirm if the plants proposed are drought tolerant. I believe the designer is objecting to this regulation because it still requires landscaping even if there is screening in the form of the solid fence. In summary, if the design standard is to provide screening between the ADU and adjacent parcels, a solid fence would be sufficient per this designer's view. Furthermore, the alternative of installing a fence meets the intent of the first and second regulation. So the city should implement it accordingly. And again, this is the designer's view, not ours. Staff believes that regulations 1, 2, and 3 are exclusive of one another. In other words, regulation 1 has no alternative. You must plant these plants every 5 feet or every 10 feet, depending on the size of the plant. Regulation 2 requires the plant specimen must be at least 6 feet tall when installed. If you do not want to install a 6-foot tall plant, you don't have to if you have a 6-foot tall fence. And regulation 3 implies that all landscaping must be drought tolerant. Staff has invited the designer to the public hearing to see if he would like to voice his concerns directly to the Planning Commission. Staff has opened the Planning Commission's comments and suggestions regarding the request. That's the only comment we received. Next slide, please. Ordinances implementing laws related to ADUs are statutorily exempt from CEQA according to Public Resource Code section 21080.7. Therefore, the project's statutorily exempt. Next slide, please. Staff recommends considering the CEQA exemption and adopting resolution 22-027 based on the findings. If approved, planning staff will introduce the ordinance to City Council at their December 6th meeting. This concludes staff's summary of the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if they're building or fire related questions, we happen to have Bill Tott and Arthur Belton from our fire prevention team and our building team in the audience also. And Holly's also here too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Posadi. At this time, does Planning Commission, anyone have, okay, Commissioner DeLong.
Yeah, sure. Mr. Posadi, if I have a one-story house that I want to build 2 ADUs, is that possible? As long as you met the standard.
May I ask you some questions, Commissioner DeLong?
Yeah, if you're okay to build the 2 ADUs.
Would they be, so you could not build 2, you could build 1 detached and 1 attached ADU. You could build one detached ADU and one attached JADU, but you cannot build two detached ADUs.
How about the electric bill? You're going to separate that? You're going to put a separate line for electric and water?
So do you need, is your question, do you need a separate utility connection?
Yes.
Okay. No, the state actually doesn't allow cities to require a separate utility connection directly from the street. You can, well, at least for the electricity, you can connect to your main residence.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Long. Any other commissioners have any other questions? And I'll go ahead and allow, if you have questions, for the staff as well as fire or the building officials. So I see Vice Chair, you have a question.
Yes, I do. And I don't remember what section it was in, but it was on page 10, number 8G. And it talked about a second story window that had to be frosted so you couldn't look out the window. And I'm wondering why they're requiring to do that.
So the state's not requiring that, the city's requiring that in order to address any potential privacy impacts on neighboring properties. And the city will, if you do propose a two-story ADU, whether detached or attached, on the second floor, the window would need to be with either clear story, where it's a kind of at 5 or 6 foot level, or frosted.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I could add to that just really quickly, that specific requirement was added by the council at one of our, as part of one of the previous ordinance amendments, specifically, as Michael said, to address privacy issues between, some of these ADUs get built really close, like within 4 feet of the property line. And we've had issues in the past with complaints from neighbors on privacy. So that was the way that the council addressed it.
Okay, I'm just, I'm thinking that, I could totally understand it in a bathroom, but in a living room or a bedroom where maybe you wanted to be able to look out the windows and see our beautiful hills that are starting to turn green now, by the way. And, and then you have drapes too, like everybody else does. I have drapes in my living room that I close, or upstairs in my bedroom. So I'm just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And I understand the council decision, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Albano.
Chair, I have a question for Michael. What would be the required setback from the front yard, from the street?
So one of the slides represented that, well, discuss that question. It depends. It depends because the state is saying that if someone wants to build an accessory dwelling unit in their front yard, the city has to make space to allow them to build an 800 square foot ADU. Now, your question, if I'm just to make sure I'm on the same page, Commissioner, is how close can they get to the sidewalk?
Or if it is attached to the house, to the main house. Not specifically, did you think that it would be like an independent detached? I was thinking if it was attached to the main house, what would be the setback, at least to have at least some yard, some nice view of the front of the house.
If I may, so the standard is actually 20 feet. That's been added to the ordinance. That's added to, or that setback is now clarified in this ordinance amendment. The standard will be 20 feet, which is consistent with the setback for the primary dwelling in any of the in most of the residential districts. So certainly all of the R1 districts. what Michael was explaining though is that state law now does require us to relax the 20-foot front setback if it would prohibit building at least an 800-foot accessory dwelling unit. So really, the standard is 20 feet, but it may be less than that if the property owner wants to build an ADU and it doesn't fit within the 20-foot setback. So it could be 16 or it could be 15, but it will be as large as it needs to be up to 20 feet, if that makes sense. It's kind of a sliding scale, so to speak, which is a tricky part about some of the changes that the state legislature has made to these standards.
Thank you, Director. One last question, just for clarification. So when people build like an ADU, whether it's detached or attached to the home or a garage conversion, is it required that the restrooms or the bathroom is like what do you call it, ADA requirement?
I don't believe so. I kind of want to confirm with the building official, Bill Todd, regarding ADA compliance.
Yes, hi, glad to. Hi, Bill Todd here. Hello, council or commissioners, sorry. No, for residential, those applications for accessibility do not apply that we have in our Chapter 11 of our building code. So, but there are some other considerations that, for instance, on the fire side, there's a requirement that there be a 4-foot wide path of travel that's clear to the ADU main entrance. And if there is a fence intervening, that the gate be 4 foot as well and be either have a lock, what they call a Knox box, or unlatched. So it really is a matter of concern for if they have to get a gurney in there, say they have an emergency. And so they have to have a path of travel that can accommodate that for the safety of everybody. So other than that, no, there's no requirements for accessibility standards to be applied. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just clarifying. Thank you so much, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Albana. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? Comments? And this will be questions for both, for staff as well as building official and also our deputy fire chief. Commissioner Galong?
Yeah. Do you have a minimum or maximum people that can live on the ADUs?
The state legislation doesn't reference the minimum number of occupants.
Thank you.
That I'm aware of.
Right, thank you, Commissioner Long. Any other questions? All right. Okay, if there's no other questions, then this being a public hearing item, I'd like to. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I open it up, did you have a comment? Okay. This being a public hearing item, I'd like to open up the public forum. Ms. Medina, is anyone in the queue to ask any, make any public comments?
No community members for this item, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Medina. Can I get a motion to close the public forum?
I make a motion to close the public forum.
All right. Commissioner Awasti makes a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second, Commissioner Gallant. Roll call vote. Commissioner Mosen.
Aye.
Commissioner Medina Ashby.
Aye.
Commissioner Awasti.
Aye.
Commissioner Gallant.
Aye.
Commissioner Albana.
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella.
Aye.
Chair Chuan is aye. Okay, motion passes. The public forum is closed. Okay, do we have any other last questions for any of the staff, building official, or fire chief? If there's no questions, do I have any motions? And can we put the motion or the recommendations?
Make one.
Okay, planning director.
I'm going to make one quick clarification. So This is a little bit tricky, and the city attorney may need to weigh in as well, but so there's a little bit of a timing issue with this because the state law or the state legislature passed the law in September, October. Now we're getting this to you and it goes to the council, but there's once the council, if they approve this and adopt the ordinance, they'll do that in December, but it won't fully go into effect. There's a time period, a 30-day time period. So that takes us into January, as Michael noted. So we have in front of you, if you look at actually the paper copy of the staff report, the recommendations, there's two recommendations here. The first one is resolution 2227, which is for an urgency ordinance. And an urgency ordinance is needed because it goes into effect immediately so that when January 1st rolls around, we have and the council adopts it, we'll have the ordinance in place. And then the second resolution 22028 is a regular ordinance. And that's the one that won't go into effect until 30 days after the second reading of the ordinance by the council, which won't happen until December 20th. So we have that gap between January 1st and January 20th when the regular ordinance goes into effect, which the urgency ordinance is intended to cover. So sorry, that was a little long-winded, a little complicated, but there's the two different ordinances. So we'll have, again, I think two different votes or can they do that in one vote for both resolutions? Maybe it's better to have two votes.
I think it would be better to have two votes.
Okay, so we can do the first one for the urgency ordinance and then the second one.
Okay, so there's any items. Okay, so the recommendations are stated on the screen there. So thank you. All right, so do I have any motions? Okay, let's go with do I have any motions for the recommendations for okay, Commissioner Albana.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve that urgency ordinance.
Okay, do you want to read
An urgency ordinance.
Just look on the screen. That's the one, probably one.
This one.
Okay, yep, okay.
I got it. I'd like to make a motion to approve an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Milpitas, amending Section 13, which is the special uses of Chapter 10, zoning, of Title 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code relating to the accessory dwelling units and determining the ordinance to be exempt from CEQA.
See which.
Is it? Did I read it right?
All right, let's go.
We're going to do.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Right.
I will correct.
So,
what I
okay,
just
you want to
said.
restate your motion then? Okay.
Yes, I would like to restate my motion and for correction, strike what I just read. So number 2, I had the wrong thing in front of. Adopt resolution number 22-027, recommending that the City Council adopt an urgency ordinance immediately upon adoption, approving zoning text amendment ZA 22-0007 to amend Title 11, can't read, of the Section 13.08 accessory dwelling units of Chapter 10 zoning of Title 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code to comply with recent changes to sections 65852-.2 comma 65852.22 comma and 65852.23 of the government code section 17980.12 of the health and safety code.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Albano. Do I get a second?
Second.
Okay, got a second from Commissioner Medina Ashby. Roll call vote. Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Commissioner Wasti,
Aye.
Commissioner Galang,
Aye.
Commissioner Albano,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
Aye.
Chair Chuan is aye. Motion passes. So resolution number 22-027 is adopted. Okay. Next item, do I have a motion for, do I have a second motion Or sorry, do I have another motion for the next resolution?
I can make a motion for the next.
Okay, I got a motion from Commissioner Owasti. Go ahead.
Adopt resolution number 22-028, recommending that the city council adopt an ordinance replacing the urgency ordinance when effective 30 days after adoption, approving zoning text amendment ZA 22-0007 to amend title X1 Roman character, chapter 10, section 13.08, accessory dwelling units of chapter 10 zoning of title Roman 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code to comply with the recent changes to sections 65852.2, 65852.22, and 65852.23 of the Government Code and section 17980.12 of the Health and Safety Code.
Thank you. I got a motion from Commissioner Owasti. Got a second. And I got a second from Commissioner Glong. Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Commissioner Owasti,
Aye.
Commissioner Glong,
Aye.
Commissioner Albana,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
Aye.
Chair Chuan is aye. Okay, motion passes. Resolutions adopted. Okay. Okay, both are adopted, so motion passes. Next item is new business. There are no items for new business. Legalese, any person aggrieved by any final decision of any board, commission, or department head to the city of Milpitas may appeal the decision to the city council by filing written notice of the appeal with the city clerk within 12 calendar days of the date of said decision and paying the required fee. This time limit shall be strictly enforced. Next item, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I got a motion from
Second.
Commissioner Albana, and I got a second from Vice Chair Ciardella. Roll call vote. Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Commissioner Owasti,
Aye.
Commissioner Galong, Commissioner Albana,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ciardella,
Aye.
Chair Chuan is aye. Meeting's adjourned.